Hey everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today, we're going to learn all you need to know about calorie tracking. Now, this video is specifically meant for beginners, but if you believe yourself to be a calorie tracking veteran, and if you've been doing this for a long time, I'm pretty sure that you can get something out of this video as well. So do watch on. I will break it down into several points and make sure that I can condense it into as much information in each point as possible.
So let's see why calorie tracking is so important and why is it useful to do so. Now, if you see the points here, you will see that it can give you an idea of how much energy is actually going into your system. But more importantly, if I can talk a little bit about what it can do for you as a human being, is it can make you reach your physique goals much more easily than if you were to just sort of eat clean. Calorie tracking can give you a correct figure, so it can provide you with some data on how many calories or how much energy is actually going into your system and whether that is more, less, or equal to what you need on a daily basis, which can be classified respectively as a calorie surplus, which is more than what you need, a calorie deficit, which is less than what you require, and maintenance calories, which is the number of calories you would burn on a daily basis doing the activities that you generally do. Another fairly important thing to know about when you're tracking calories is what exactly do you mean by macros? Now, if you're tracking calories, it always is by tracking the macros that are going into your system as well. Macros is basically a short form of the word macronutrients, or broadly classified into um, the nutrients that are present in your food. Now, this has nothing to do with the vitamins and minerals at this point. Those are classified as micronutrients. These are the bigger sort of the word macro, meaning big. So the bigger substances that make your food. These would be your protein, your carbohydrates or carbs, and your fat. Now, for the purpose of this video, I'm also including fiber, but usually the fiber comes under carbohydrates as a subgroup of it. Now, since we're talking about calorie tracking, we need to also know how many calories are present in each one of these food groups. So as you can see here, carbs will have 4 calories per gram. Protein will also have 4 calories per gram. Fat tends to have 9 calories per gram, which is why some people feel like it is more satiating or it can make you feel fuller. However, remember that that comes at the expense of much higher calories per gram as well. And lastly, fiber, which would have anywhere between 1 to 3 calories per gram. Now, I know what you might be thinking. Fiber is not really digestible by the human body, but we also have our gut microorganisms to help us digest certain food substances. We're not only made of human cells, we have some bacteria living in our system as well. Now, those bacteria can change this fiber that you eat into some short chain fatty acids, which, of course, we have the ability to digest. So these short chain fatty acids can yield anywhere between 1 to 3 calories per gram of ingestion. Now, this is not something that I would want you guys to get caught up in. Fiber is usually accounted for as carbs in most of the tracking apps that you use. So try not to pay too much attention to that aspect. But this is also some very helpful information, which is why I included it within this video. So now that we know what macros are, let's try and understand how we can track them. The best way that I can tell you that I personally use as well is by use of some tracking apps. Now, for the Indian population, I feel like MyFitnessPal and Healthify Me tend to be the best ones. They generally tend to have most of the food that we eat. Healthify Me more so because they have catered to the Indian population a little bit. But if you continue on with this video, you will see how I break down certain foods into their bare ingredients, in which case MyFitnessPal can be a huge lifesaver because of the kind of convenience it provides in tracking previously tracked food. Now, what I want you guys to understand is that not all food items will be comprised of a single macronutrient. Most often we find foods that are comprised of all three in certain percentages. Now, depending on which macronutrient is highest in percentage in that particular food, we tend to say that that particular food is a good source of that particular macronutrient. For example, if I were to talk about rice, I would say that it is a good source of carbohydrates, maybe not so much a good source of fat or protein, which can be there in very minimal values, but let's be honest, they don't really make up too much of it. Another example I can probably give here is of ghee, oil, and butter. Now, these are primarily composed of fat and don't really have a lot of protein or carbohydrates within them. So again, there will always be food that will be extremely high in a single macronutrient, but to say that they will only be comprised of one of them is probably a little bit of stretch for most of the food items that we eat. So now that you've downloaded the app, let's see what you have to do next. The app is now going to ask you some questions on what's your age, your height, your body weight, and maybe even your sex. The one thing that I feel most tracking apps forget to account for is your fat percentage, which can be crucial in determining how many calories you may be burning on a daily basis. Now, this is probably one of the reasons why most of the apps suggest a calorie value that is so under or over what your requirements might be. Another thing that a lot of people go wrong with is what their activity levels are. Now, if you are a sedentary person or you have a desk job rather, I would say probably choose lightly active to moderately active, depending on how much exercise you're getting in the week. If you do 3 to 4 times or maybe even 5 times of weight training in a week, I would still not go beyond moderately active, as we don't really burn too many calories while we're doing weight training. If you stick to the values provided by the app, I would say get the data, track your weight every day, track your calories every day, get the average values at the end of every week, wait for 2 to 3 weeks and see what the reduction or increase in body weight is like, or what the movement in body weight, if any, is like, and then take evasive action or take action according to those numbers. If you feel like the rate at which you're losing weight is too fast, probably a better idea to add some calories back into the equation. If you feel like it's too slow and you're not really seeing the scale move, again, probably take the calories back down slightly that you're eating. This will be very subjective though. I would always recommend working with a coach when you're trying to work on physique goals, because this can be a slippery slope where you might end up eating too few calories as well. That can also end up causing some harm to your body if you continue that for a very long period of time. A good rate of weight loss to aim for is probably somewhere between 0.5 to 1.2% of your body weight every week. If it goes anywhere above or below that, it's probably not the best idea to stick with those calories. Same would apply for weight gain. If it's anywhere between 0.5 to 1.2% of your body weight, it's a good rate of weight gain. Anywhere below or above that, you'd probably be gaining too much fat. Below that, you probably might not see a lot of changes. Now, one thing that always throws a lot of people off is the accuracy of calorie tracking. Most people would come to me and tell me that, oh, but I can't find the most accurate value. That's not the point. We don't want accuracy, or rather, we don't need it. We need consistency. Let me give you an example. Now, if you've been tracking something that is actually worth 250 calories, but you have been tracking it at 200 calories for the longest time, guess what? The numbers that you've been tracking week in and week out with respect to your weight averages, with respect to your calorie averages, those will tell you where you might be going or where you might be going wrong. Now, based on those numbers is how we would want you to act. Do not change the value of whatever you select on day one if it's something that you have on a regular basis. If the margin of error is very low, which is also expected. Now, if you've been tracking something that is worth 200 calories as 50, that could be a problem. And that is where a lot of people can go wrong and feel like they're eating very little calories, but not really losing weight. In those cases, it's always best to ask someone if you're tracking something the right way or not. But also, this video will provide you with a lot more information on how to track certain things so you don't go wrong with that aspect. Coming to the next hurdle, which is tracking cooked versus uncooked weight. In my experience, there are about three reasons why someone stops tracking. The first one is obviously they don't see any tangible results. They feel like they're doing something that is not really leading them anywhere. Now, they might not be doing it the right way, but they think they are, which might throw them off and which might demotivate them, and then they don't want to track anymore. Fair enough. The second one is they feel like they cannot find accurate values for what they input into the app. Fair enough. That is why I'm making this video, so that you can see how to track certain food items much better than you currently might be. And the third one is obviously, when do I track food that is cooked and when do I track food that is uncooked? Very, very good question. Very relevant. Once again, my answer will remain the same. If you've been tracking something from day one in its uncooked weight, I would prefer if you keep tracking it uncooked for as long as you keep calorie tracking. And vice versa. If you've been tracking it cooked, track it cooked. Now, for certain items, especially the items which when you cook them, they retain a lot of water or you add a lot of water while cooking them, it's always best to measure these things in their dry weight rather than their cooked weight. Let's say, for example, that you're having dal. I don't know about you guys, but the person who prepares my food tends to put a bucket load of water into the dal before they prepare it. Now, let's say that I were to measure the cooked dal on my weighing scale. It will probably show me a value of 100 grams, which might only be consisting of water, or rather not only, but like mostly be consisting of water, and I track it as 100 grams of dal. I am 100% wrong in that scenario. That is not 100 grams of dal. So in these situations, when you know that there's a lot of water going into the preparation of that food, it's always best to track those kinds of food uncooked. However, when it comes to meat, vegetables, rice, or anything else, you can track those kinds of food cooked as well, because you will have values specifically for cooked weight of those particular items. So if you're tracking rice cooked, try and make sure that you enter into the app white rice or brown rice, comma, cooked. That will give you the correct value for it. Same goes for chicken. Once again, you have to be consistent with the values that you select. I have seen this happen firsthand. I have seen people track white rice as 90 calories for 100 grams, and I have seen some of my clients track white rice 130 calories for 100 grams. One of them is definitely off. But both of them get the results because I don't tell them to change that value. Since they've been using that value, continue using it. We will adjust your calorie intake based on the averages that we see at the end of the week. If I feel like you're falling short, or feel like you're going over, or feel like the weight loss is not adequate or too much, I will take evasive action on the total number of calories that I would suggest they intake on a daily basis. That way, I'm not really micromanaging on what exactly each dish is giving them, but actually trying to see the bigger picture and managing something that is going to be much less of an effort for them to do. Now, one of the biggest hurdles, you have so many options in the app. Which one do I choose? I tend to give three guidelines when you're choosing something to track. The first step, always weigh the food that you're eating. Very important. Make sure that you have a weight value for the food that you're eating. Drastically increases the chances of you being accurate with the calorie values. The second one is try and break down the food that you're eating into its bare ingredients whenever possible. If you're eating something like butter garlic noodles, the main ingredients in that dish will be butter and noodles. So you can track both of them as separate entities into the app. The spices that go into preparing a dish, as opposed to what most people think, do not contain a lot of calories, and you do not have to be so engrossed in tracking them. Try and pay attention to the bigger picture, try and pay attention to the bigger ingredients that are going into the preparation of food, and you'll be well off. And finally, if both of these options fail, it doesn't hurt to track the option that is an average value of all the options that are available. What do I mean by that? Let's say that you're again eating butter garlic noodles and you want to track that. You enter butter garlic noodles into the app. Now it'll show you 10,000 options. One of those will have something like 1,500 calories for an arbitrary value like one serving, which is another point that I'm coming to. And another one will have 200 calories. You see the difference? This is where a lot of people do tend to feel very anxious while tracking certain food. And I get it, I understand. But there is a way out. Now, you don't have to select either one of these values. Try and see what is the value that you can see recurring a lot. So if there's a value that's coming in front of you a lot, that has been entered a lot, I would probably choose that. And then I will see whether it has a weight value attached to it. So is it an arbitrary serving size? Is it one serving or one bowl? Or does it actually have a weight value attached to it, like 1 gram, 100 grams, or 500 grams, or something of that sort? That will make your job a lot easier. And lastly, I will also try and ensure whenever possible to see if there is a green tick beside that option, or whether all of the macronutrients in that particular dish have been entered or not. Now, eating out can be a source of anxiety for a lot of people too, because you have no idea what's going into the dish. You have no way to measure it. And while we're on that, please do not be the kind of person who takes a kitchen scale to a restaurant and weighs the dishes. You do not need to do that. Now, what can you do? Let's see. The first thing I would suggest is follow the steps that I just outlined in the previous point. Those will get you really far as you can follow those. So if you don't have the option of weighing it, if you can break it down into its bare ingredients, excellent. Try and do that. And try and gauge or estimate how much of each ingredient there would be, if that's possible. If not, select one of the options from the app, like we spoke about, which would be an average value of all the options that are available, preferably one with a green tick, preferably one with all the macronutrients listed within it. Finally, what I suggest doing whenever you eat out or order in is, even after you've tracked that particular food item. If you're on a fat loss program, remember it does not hurt to overestimate the calories on some occasions rather than underestimating that. Point number one. Remember, some occasions, very subjective. And number two, try to add on top of tracking that particular dish, try and add an extra tablespoon or two of fat, oil, butter, ghee, etc. into the equation as well. Remember that restaurants try and make the dish as tasty, as palatable, hyper palatable as possible. They want you to consume more of it. So they will make sure that there's a lot of fat that goes into the preparation of the dish. So it does not hurt to add some extra fat on top of the tracking of the dish. Now, what about tracking packaged food and liquids? Well, most of the liquids you can weigh. You can weigh, or you can get the nutritional info from the bottle that you're consuming them. It'll already be there on that bottle. And if you're only having a fraction of it, you can always weigh it. For example, milk. Let's say that you get a 1 liter bottle or 1 liter Tetra Pak, and then you're only consuming 100 ml. They will have the values for the calories, fat, etc. written on the back. Now try and select an option that will be closest to those values, or even better, whenever possible, try and enter the brand name into the app and the dish that you're having. More often than not, the app tends to have those dishes, and you can correlate and see whether the numbers match in the app and the carton or not. And if they do, excellent. Go ahead and track those. Same would be true for your packaged food and processed food. They usually have a nutrition label that you can work off of. And while this may not be 100% accurate at all times, it helps with being consistent. So you can have the same value whenever you're eating that particular packaged food. And if you feel like at any point the numbers aren't really adding up, you know that that's probably not the best thing to have in your diet at that point. One example that comes to my mind is of this brand of noodles that I refuse to name at this point, that said it's kind of exactly like Maggi, but it has probably 1/4 the amount of calories within it. And I was quite surprised when I saw that. And to this day, I don't believe that that's true. So it shows that it has 70 calories for a serving, while Maggi, on the other hand, has somewhere around 280 to 300. I'm not really sure, for the same serving size. So it's basically the same dish, and I do not understand how it can be so different in the energy value. One of my clients was consuming it, and we did see a fair bit of stagnation and plateauing in her weight loss until she made me aware of the fact that she was consuming that particular thing. So be a little careful when you're having packaged and processed food. Not always are the values 100% right. But again, consistency pays off. If you've been consistent with the tracking, you can always see where you're going wrong. All right, that's probably a very, very long video. I tried to get in as much information within it as possible. I hope you guys have enjoyed it. I hope you're still watching. For all of you who are still watching, thank you so much for making it to the end. Now, just to conclude, I will make sure that I highlight the points that I want you to be aware of the most. The first one would be look for consistency over accuracy. Always try and be 100% consistent with the numbers and the tracking rather than 100% accurate. Number two, whenever possible, try to choose the green tick option. That reduces the chances of you going wrong and increases the chances of you being more accurate with your readings. The third one is make sure you remember which items to measure uncooked and which ones to measure cooked. That'll also go a long way in making sure that you have some accuracy in the way that you're tracking. And finally, guys, try not to be hyper vigilant about the numbers. It's okay if you go over or under on some days. That's normal. Everyone does that. It happens to the best of us. Especially in the beginning, it is going to be extremely difficult for you to be 100% right with your tracking. It's okay to have some error in your tracking at some points. It's definitely not worth your mental health to be too caught up within that. I hope you guys have liked the video. I hope you enjoyed it. And I hope all of you who have watched it had something that you could learn from it. I would love it if you would share, like, and maybe even leave a small comment on the video. It would mean the world to me. So try and do that, and I'll see you guys next time.